నమస్కారం. డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ సార్వత్రిక విశ్వవిద్యాలయం విద్యార్థులకు స్వాగతం. ఈ ప్రసారంలో
Today's topic is about rock cycle. The study of rocks is the subject petrology. Petrology is the study of rocks. Rock means an aggregate of minerals, or simply a substance which is having two or more than two minerals can be said as a rock. But there are some rocks which are having only one mineral, and such rocks are called as monomineralic rocks. Largely, we are discussing today about the rock cycle. The rock cycle reveals, or it says that rocks are of three kinds. As we know, rock is an aggregate of minerals, and rocks are of three kinds based on their origin or genesis. They are igneous rocks, sedimentary rocks, and metamorphic rocks. Let us discuss one by one. The first one is igneous rocks. Igneous rocks are otherwise called as primary rocks. Primary means the crust, mantle and core. We know the interior part of the earth. From the pyrosphere, the rock fluid ejects or erupts onto the surface of the earth. When the rock fluid comes on to the surface of the earth, and then when with the releasing temperature or with the increasing cooling process, the rock fluid, be it is magma or lava, will slowly solidifies. This solidified lava or magma is called as a rock, primary rock, or otherwise igneous rock. As this rock is generating from the primary process, that means from the solidification of magma or lava, we are calling this as primary rock or igneous rock. Igneous means fire. Igneous means fire. There is a lot of involvement of fire, hence the rock is called as igneous rock. Let us discuss briefly all the three. The first one we discussed, igneous rock or the primary rock. The next one is sedimentary rock or secondary rock. The sedimentary or secondary rock derives either from igneous rock or from metamorphic rock. The pre-existing rocks, when they are exposed to, pre-existing means already existed, either igneous or metamorphic rocks. These rocks, when they are exposed to the geological agents, namely temperature, pressure, water, blowing wind or moving ice. These are the geological agents which acts on the exposed rock surfaces. When the rocks are exposed to such kind of geological agents action, the upper surface material will be subjected to denudation. Some part of the material will be ejected out from the surface of rock material, and this material will be removed. The removed material is called as debris or weathered material. The process is otherwise called as weathering. The weathered material will slowly transport, and finally it gets deposited and it becomes a rock called as sedimentary rock. Briefly, we can say that on the sedimentary process or secondary activity or the geological influence of geological agents causes the rock from igneous or metamorphic, and we are calling it as sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock do consist only, or it exhibits only secondary process or sedimentary involvement. Sedimentary rocks and igneous rocks, when they do present as outcrops on the surface of the earth, we say that when a rock or any substance is stable, we say that there is an equilibrium among its constituents. Say if it is an igneous rock, and we know that igneous rock do contain lot of mineral constituents. All the mineral constituents, if they are having some equilibrium among them, the rock will be stable, be it is igneous rock or sedimentary rock. Lot of rocks that present beneath the earth. Mostly the third kind of rock we call as metamorphic rock. A rock which is derived on metamorphism. The process of metamorphism from igneous or sedimentary will give rise to metamorphic rock. As we are already discussing that there is an equilibrium prevails among all the mineral constituents that present in a rock if it is to be stable. With the increasing temperatures and with the increasing pressure and the influence of chemically active fluids, sometimes what happens is rocks without attaining fluid state in semi solid state itself, be it is igneous or sedimentary, they will transform or recrystallize or they alter into a third kind of rock, and that third kind of rock we are calling it as metamorphic rock. This is how rocks we call as three kinds: igneous rock, sedimentary rock and metamorphic rock. Let us discuss one example for each type of rock, and we often hear the name granite, basalt, pegmatite, and all the three kinds of rocks, granite, pegmatite, basalt, they belongs to igneous variety of rocks. That means they are formed by the solidification of rock fluid or magma or lava. And we often see lot of sedimentary rocks, sandstones, shales, limestones, conglomerates, etc., and they belong to the second one, sedimentary rocks. And the third category, metamorphic rocks, we often hear and we use for decoration purposes and flooring, marble. A sedimentary rock, limestone, on metamorphism will change into a rock called as marble, and this marble belongs to metamorphic category. And so far we discussed about the three types of rocks and how they have derived, and each rock will have its own property. Each rock will have its unique distinction. Let us discuss the properties of igneous and sedimentary, because the third type or metamorphic rock do exhibit the properties of igneous and sedimentary. If a metamorphic rock is derived from igneous rock, we call it as orthometamorphic. If it is derived from a sedimentary rock, we call it as a parametamorphic. So it do exhibit hybrid properties. Metamorphic rocks mostly exhibits hybrid properties depending upon their genesis, depending upon their base. If it is from igneous, it exhibits igneous properties. If the metamorphic is derived from sedimentary, it exhibits sedimentary properties. First, we discuss about igneous and sedimentary characteristics. The property hard and compactness, as the term igneous itself displays that it is hard. Igneous rock, the term itself is indicating that it is very hard. Hard, compact substances are called as igneous rocks. So igneous rocks do contain hard and compact property, whereas the sedimentary rocks do have loose. They are very loose rock formations and binded by some cementing material. They are not very hard and compact compared to igneous rocks. The same property in case of metamorphic rock is of hybrid nature. If it is from igneous, it do exhibit hard and compactness. If it is from sedimentary, it do have a loose property. It is not that much solid. And another important character is igneous rocks are flat, tabular in nature. They are flat and tabular in nature, whereas sedimentary rocks do have a special character called as stratification or bedding. Bedding or stratification is an important characteristic of sedimentary rock, whereas igneous rocks do not have bedding or stratification. They are flat. They are having tabular property, as lavas or magmas, when they are ejected in larger volumes, larger quantity, in bulk quantity, the depositions will be tabular in nature, whereas the metamorphic rocks do not contain either of the qualities. They do have disturbed quality of flat nature if it is derived from igneous, and they do have disturbed quality of stratification or bedding if it is derived from a sedimentary rock. We have to remember that the most important variation or distinction among the three types of rocks is stratification or bedding. This is the unique property of sedimentary rock, whereas igneous rocks do not contain mostly bedding or stratification. They are tabular and flat in nature. And the third important character or variation amongst the three rock formations is the presence of fossils. As we know that the igneous rocks are very hard and compact, and they are derived from the solidification or crystallization of magma or lava, we cannot expect the presence of any kind of fauna or flora. Hence, the presence of fossil we can't expect from igneous rocks. So, there is no presence of fossils in igneous rocks, but the sedimentary rocks do have a link with water. They do have a link with water. Lot of plant and animal organisms do grow under sedimentary environment. Hence, we can expect the presence of fossils in case of sedimentary rocks. Whereas, as we are discussing in metamorphic rock, if it is derived from igneous, there is no presence of fossils. If it is from sedimentary rock, we do see a disturbed quantity or disturbed structure of fossils in metamorphic rocks derived from sedimentary ones. And one more difference among all the three types of rocks is mostly igneous rocks are crystalline in nature. Mostly igneous rocks are having the property of crystallinity, whereas the sedimentary rocks do not have that quantum of crystallization which we expect in case of igneous rocks. These are the three different types of properties largely for the three types of rocks. Igneous rocks do not have fossils, sedimentary rocks will have fossils, and bedding or stratification do not present in igneous rocks, and bedding and stratification is the unique property of sedimentary rocks. And after discussing about the three distinct properties of igneous, sedimentary and metamorphic, let us discuss in detail about each type of rock. Igneous rocks are largely classified into three kinds depending upon their depth of occurrence. Depending upon their depth of occurrence, igneous rocks are classified into three kinds, and they are plutonic igneous rocks, plutonic, volcanic and hypabyssal. Plutonic forms rocks which are formed at depths and which are having larger crystals can be called as plutonic igneous rocks. An example is granite. The second one is volcanic rocks. Rocks which are formed either on the surface or near the surface can be said as volcanic rocks. Example, basalt. If a rock do present not at depth, not on the surface, that means if it present in intermediate depths, that means if it present in between plutonic and volcanic, we call it as hypabyssal rock. Example, dolerite. This is how, based on occurrence or depth of formation, igneous rocks are of three kinds, and they are plutonic, hypabyssal and volcanic. In the same way, igneous rocks can also be classified into different categories based on the percentage of silica. Based on the amount of silica, igneous rocks are classified into different categories, and they are acidic. Igneous rocks are classified as acidic if the total quantum of presence of silica is more than 65%. If any igneous rock do contain more than 65% of silica, we call it as acidic rock. If it presents 65 to 55% of silica in an igneous rock, we call it as intermediate. If it presents in between 55 and 45, we call it as basic. If the amount of silica constituents present in igneous rock are less than 45, we call it as ultra basic. So, based upon the presence of silica, igneous rocks are classified into acidic, intermediate, basic and ultra basic rocks. Granite is an example, typical example for acidic rocks. Dolerite is a typical example for intermediate rock. Gabbro is a typical example for basic rock. Peridotite is a typical example for ultra basic rocks. This is how igneous rocks are classified into different kinds, and based on the same percentage of silica. Igneous rocks can also be classified as oversaturated, saturated and undersaturated rocks. If the amount of silica present is more than the required, and if silica do present as free quartz in igneous rock, we call such igneous formations as oversaturated ones. If it present to the limited extent or to the required extent, we call it as a saturated rock. If the percentage of silica that present in igneous rocks is less than the required amount, we call it as undersaturated rocks. In the same way, igneous rocks can also be classified depending upon the presence of element, depending upon the presence of certain elements, say calcium, sodium and potassium. Calcium, sodium and potassium, if any igneous rock do contain minerals which includes or which consists of all these three elements, calcium, sodium and potassium, we call them as felsic minerals or felsic rocks. If they do contain mineral constituents with elements such as calcium, magnesium and iron, we call them as mafic. One is felsic category, another one is mafic category. The felsic are obviously light colored rocks and the mafic are obviously dark colored rocks. And this is how we can describe the primary rocks or igneous rocks. And let us discuss about the secondary rocks or sedimentary rocks. As we know, bedding or stratification is the important characteristic of sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rocks largely can be divided into two kinds. One is sedentary, sedentary, sedentary rock. Another one is transported rock. If any sedimentary rock gets no transportation at all after its formation, we call it as sedentary rock. Mostly the sedimentary formations which are derived from the pre-existing rocks will be subjected to the second process called as transportation, and such transported material will deposit and result into a rock, that is a secondary or sedimentary rock. We call it as transported sedimentary rock. Before we go further into the classification of sedimentary rock, let us discuss in precise how a sedimentary rock is formed. As we already discussed, the process of sedimentary formation can be classified into different stages. The first stage in the formation of sedimentary rock is weathering or denudation. The second one is transportation by different geological agents, and the third one is deposition at a conducive environment. At a proper basin, all the transported material will get deposited, and this deposited material will be subjected to different sorts of activities, and such activities are: the first one is compaction. The sedimentary substances will get compacted. The compacted material will result into the lessening space among the different constituents of sedimentary material. That means volume gets reduced after the compaction. The second one is cementation. The sedimentary constituents or mineral constituents will be binded with one another by cementing material, be it is calcium or be it is silica. Silica or calcium will compact like the cement, which binds the bricks. The sedimentary constituents will be compacted and cemented. And the next important crucial process is lithification or diagenesis. When once the compacted materials are formed, with the passage of time, all the compacted material will transform from raw mineral constituents into a rock formation, and this transformation of sedimentary material into rock is called as diagenesis or lithification. And the sediment rocks can also be classified into different categories based upon their grain size. or depending upon their mineral constituents. If they are derived from materials which are having mechanical origin, we call them as simply clastic sedimentary rocks, and the minerals are clastic minerals. If the mineral constituents are having chemical or organic origin, we call them as non-clastic rocks. So, this is how sediment rocks are classified into clastic and non-clastic sedimentary rocks. And in the same way, sediment rocks are classified into rudiceous, arenaceous, argillaceous rocks. If a sedimentary rock do contain pebble sized constituents, we call such sediment rock as rudiceous rock. If a sedimentary rock contains sedimentary grain of coarse sand size, we call it as arenaceous rock. If it is of clay sized particle, we call it as argillaceous rock. This is how sedimentary rocks are classified into these three types of rocks based upon their grain size. Then when once we discuss about igneous and sedimentary, we have to discuss about the metamorphic rocks as well. As we discussed that the formation of a metamorphic rock takes place under semi-partial or semi-solid state or semi-liquid state. A rock without attaining solution, without attaining dissolution in the solid state itself, if the transformation of one mineral to another mineral takes place, and such process we are calling as metamorphic process. And there are certain agents which causes the transformation or metamorphism, and those agents are, one is temperature. As we know, the general principle is, if we go deep into the earth, there is a slight increase, there is a constant regular increase of temperature from the earth's surface into the deeper and deeper portions of the earth. Probably this is the reason for the high temperatures that exist at greater depths, and this temperature will act as an agent. And the other one is pressure. The pressure acts in the rocks that present beneath the earth's surface in two ways. One is directed pressure and the other one is non-directed pressure or shearing stress. Directed pressure will reduce the volume, whereas the mineral gets distorted by the non-directed pressure or shearing stress. This is how the rising temperatures, pressures, and there are certain fluids that circulate among the different constituents of rocks within the earth, and these circulating solutions, if they are having certain chemical mixtures also, we call them as chemically active solutions. These three will act as agents, temperature, pressure and chemically active fluids, in the transformation of pre-existing rocks into the third kind of rock called as metamorphic rock. And the metamorphic rocks are classified into different types based upon the type of metamorphism that takes place.
ఈ కార్యక్రమాలపై మీ అభిప్రాయాల్ని, సూచనల్ని, సలహాల్ని ఆహ్వానిస్తున్నాం. మా చిరునామా ద డైరెక్టర్, ఆడియో విజువల్ ప్రొడక్షన్ అండ్ రీసెర్చ్ సెంటర్, డాక్టర్ బిఆర్ అంబేద్కర్ ఓపెన్ యూనివర్సిటీ, ప్రొఫెసర్ జి రామిరెడ్డి మార్క్, రోడ్ నంబర్ 46, జూబ్లీ హిల్స్, హైదరాబాద్ 500033.